Welcome back, everyone. This is Gamer1745 here, playing Hearts of Iron 3's Black Ice 10.41. Taking a look at it, we have defeated... Oh, well, before we get into this, if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe, post a comment below. But I specifically want to thank Timothy, Sir Toyjet, the Hoffmanator, Chief, Sircon, and others for your support over on Patreon over the time. But everyone else, just hit that like button. Really do appreciate it. So, yes, we've defeated the... and I want to say, there was a British naval invasion here in the Netherlands, targeting Rotterdam, but they landed to the north and to the south and tried to push in. The current Black Ice team, and if you've watched, you know I have, we were just talking about it in the last episode, severe money disagreements of how money should be used. But they have been able to, going to give it, you keep wanting to step back and tell the full story. Let's see, for the Motherland and before that DLC and before, there were a lot of suicide naval invasions. You could leave one port open and the Allies would invade, and then you could just crush them, rinse and repeat, just bleed Britain dry, and it was bad. Well, they overreacted to it and made naval invasions not happy so much. But, and this is something that we as modders really can't get into, is to combat AI decision making. But they have found that Marine units are still aggressively, AI Marine units will, if the AI has enough of them, will invade, do naval invasions. So they have, beyond historical levels, told countries like Britain, like America, like Japan, to build Marine units so that the AI will have a better chance of, yes, a DF type raid, though they did theirs in the Netherlands, so that they had, so that there will be, more aggressive naval invasion operations, and that is a good thing. Now, it worked out very well here, in my opinion. We see all this Italian reaction because I gave Italy two objectives here, is to try to get them up there, and they came up about the time I was able to solve the problem. But if I hadn't been able to do so, it would have been a serious problem. What this is good is that it forces the player to maintain a defensive setup here in the west while fighting in the east. Now, fortunately, this happened at a good time when we were losing on the Eastern Front. So it makes sense. Yes, it was defeated, but it cost us a lot to defeat it. It sent some of our newly raised forces here, nice armored division with mechanized forces, was deployed here and not somewhere else. That was useful, and it has now taught me that I can't allow these forces to be too weak here. Now, while that was still going on, the scripted invasion happened down here. Now, what we should see is this is now United States territory, currently under the control of the Vichy government. This will tell the AI, because the AI is programmed to liberate, particular national AI, is to liberate territories. So instead of nobody thinking, and maybe not so once we, attack somewhere else, or clear all this out, they may not do invasions into here, but that this here, Casablanca, is now U.S. territory, even if we take it back, and it'll be controlled by Vichy. but it'll be U.S. territory here, where this is just British, because we can see it's British controlling Vichy. We very well may see repeated American naval invasions against Casablanca, so we will need to garrison it better than simply allowing some, few light Vichy forces sitting around. And that is key to the situation here, because without an aggressive, particularly American naval invasion, in my opinion, it is too easy against the Soviet Union. Okay, well. They're falling back to there. Biggest problem is we had a division shatter. Are you attacking? We'll support the attack. There we go. Okay, Finn, thanks for showing up. I hope everyone here has either hit the follow or subscribe button like I was just talking about. Have a good night. You can catch these later as episodes. Okay, just looking at the condition of these forces. Okay, these guys are about shattered, so this is when we were talking earlier why my manpower is doing so poorly. Instead of being defeated by losing organization, they're being defeated by being just shattering, which is not the best outcome, and which rapidly and massively drains. We can see here we suffered 35,000 casualties, roughly 3 divisions worth of casualties here. Now the Soviets suffered 100,000 casualties in this battle. They had 600,000 troops. I'm reading that correctly. They had 600,000 troops in this battle here. And I know people, if you said, lost respect for me because I cheated in just 100 manpower, which since I removed it, because all of the feedback I got was, no, you either shouldn't do it, or like one person said, lost respect. Do understand that the Soviet Union has almost effectively, my understanding is, unlimited manpower because of black ice. So you're fighting somebody who is, and it's not unlimited as in, infinite number. Is just there's a bunch of events or decisions or whatever that will keep pumping in manpower if they get lower than whatever. I haven't looked at all the code. So you're fighting someone that you're not going to be able to bleed dry. You have to defeat their units and crush them. It's more of a unit destruction situation than it is a combat kind of thing. So or attritional warfare. And the Soviet Union, although they didn't want to admit it, of course, was basically out of manpower by 1945. They were, they had huge amounts, but they didn't. Oh, we just lost Mariupol. Well, there goes the supply in that region. They could, reinforcements were becoming a no. Okay, well. Let's send you down here. Divisions we bought, or we got in here. Okay, this is here. This is one of the Erzatz divisions. Let's move you down to here. Keep you in the west against other possible invasions. Where I should have one. Maybe it's. No, that's. Thought I should have one more armored unit here. Did it shatter? Is it hiding under a different name? Huh. Seven. There's the 101 Airzats Brigade. That's the one I found. There should be like another one around here. About, no, that's a mobile unit. I don't know. I don't know. Stalin cut down the pregnancy period from 9 months to 2 months. Yes, that's the reason. Stalin's orders. Maybe I just sent it up to here and didn't follow movement. I don't know. Don't know. I do lose units periodically. Is it not? Listen, where are they? Kind of thing. Okay, these are mostly now headquarters. Okay, you get on board ship. We're gonna keep. Okay, you don't have anything attached to you. You get on board ship. We're gonna move you to here. Transport. Oh, good. Okay. We won the Battle of Delhi's here. Okay. Pinching out the American attacks. We've won down here. Very good. This is sort of the key spot here. Okay, well, this is just a. Okay, though, no, okay, they don't have. Okay, you guys come down here. Okay, and the force that I moved to here, these guys, on board ship, and let's try an invasion down here. Oh, got rid of one of the submarines in the Sea of Azov. If we can get this here, we can maybe create another small pocket with some of these good forces up here we have. Well, maybe not terribly great, but some forces to sit in these hills and mountains. Okay, we're losing. They're pushing into there. Hangar Bay maintenance has advanced there. Here. Okay, we'll let that continue. Hello, Sebastian. How you doing? Yeah, let's do the Dresden. Yeah. Transport. Give permission. New supply network. Germany grants rail construction until that. ICs. Okay. This may help us out incredibly. So we'll until June 43. So basically, what, 7 months? We'll lose 1% IC and 2.5% 5 manpower. That's almost the thing that's going to hurt the most. But yes, we will do this. And okay, so look at the colors there. Do this, and then let's. I don't know if I can tell the difference. Oh, did it get better? I don't know. I don't know. This Kiev is down here somewhere. This Kiev, yes. Did it get better supply lines? I don't know. I don't know. Oh, and we could fire, which I don't intend to here, is Case Anton here if you wanted to. Basically, it takes over control of Vichy France, but eliminates Vichy France. I would rather have Vichy France as a puppet than try it, because I don't need its resources. Maybe there's a good reason you guys could explain to me. I don't know of one that I should try to take it over directly and fully, especially now that they are in the Axis. And we can move our forces there. Well, so far our holding behind the river is doing okay. Okay. Oh, it's just going to give us, well, 10% supply throughput. Okay, so this isn't a infrastructure upgrade. It's just more supply throughput. Okay, well, that works. And we've lost the earlier limited stuff. Dresden to Lvov troop train. Okay, so we just expanded our supply throughput, generally speaking. You'll just waste more manpower on policing them. Yes, exactly. And the ICs in the South France isn't worth it. Obviously, yes, I could do with more ICs. I'm not going to suggest, because obviously, I could build all of these units all at once and be building huge amounts more of infrastructure and what. But ICs and we can, especially now that they're a puppet, we can see in here, okay, there's some decent ICs in some of these, but a lot, okay, they're in Lyon, and that, okay, so some decent, but then it obviously would be changed based on occupation laws. So yeah, it would help some, but we definitely don't need the resources, don't need the garrisoning problem. And then, again, historically, this is why Vichy's set up. When, and it's ended up being called Vichy. It was originally, they were, no, not La Rochelle. It was, I don't think, no, it was, was it La Rochelle? Or was it down here in Bordeaux? It was either La Rochelle or Bordeaux or wherever it was that they, I think it was Bordeaux is where they had the government at the time. What is it? The Third Republic falls. It's either the second or the third or whatever. Republic falls, it collapses, and the government ministers. This isn't like any proper constitutional change or anything like that. The government has collapsed, and it's not just the particular government collapsed. It, and changing who the political leaders are. This governmental structural form is collapsed, and the government ministers agree to put Pétain as head of the government. Churchill is trying for a pseudo-unification with France. No one, and I'm pretty damn sure Churchill especially, doesn't think that this is going to somehow be a true union of France and Britain and long-term single government, single country. No, it was more like, hey, we'll live or die together. We'll organize ourselves up together. We'll function as a single, wartime political entity kind of union is how I interpret what he is proposing, but that is on deaf ears for sure with the French, probably with some of the British types, upper minister types, but I don't know how well that would have gone over in Britain. And so this is 1940, Paris has fallen. The French don't know what the hell to do. They put Pétain in in charge of it. He's obviously sort of the hero of World War I. Back in the mid to late 30s, he's been giving lectures to large, huge crowds in big stadiums, lecturing on the dangers of Germany and the Nazis, and France needs to prepare. Basically, he's ignored. So he is in some ways, I just want to say this, in some ways sort of seen as, hello, Iraq, I'll get to your comment in a moment, as a Churchill-like figure, as in, danger, danger, look at the dangers of the Nazis over there. We've got to really not, and don't just think that you're, and he was also, and I just heard, read, a description of his speeches. I don't speak French and I haven't read a proper translation, but it wasn't, it was more than, don't just rely upon that Maginot Line type defense. It was, we really need to get prepared. They didn't. So they bring him in. Like they're bringing in different the British government doesn't fall. Okay, you got to understand this. The British government doesn't fall. The king is still the king. The British Parliament is still the British Parliament. It's just who's going to be prime minister, and they could tell that there's going to be no confidence in Chamberlain. He still has a lot of support, but he isn't going to be the right guy to lead. And even Chamberlain knows this, the right guy to lead Britain onward. And it's just, and since they're the conservative government, see, the conservative, there is no popular, people in the streets, and there's no members of parliament, members of lords, mayors, and town council. There's no popular sentiment that the conservative government is bad or needs to be removed. It's just Chamberlain, who stays a member of parliament and who stays a minister, I believe, without portfolio under Churchill. So Churchill keeps using Chamberlain, not just as a puppet or a figurehead or a mouthpiece. And he's dying of cancer too. I'm not sure exactly when and where all that is found out. But and he continues. He knows, and they actually set up a special little bunker near, so he can go and get some sort of treatments because he's dying of cancer. But he's staying to be a minister and helping out Churchill's government after he leaves. So he's eventually, and this is like in 41 or whatever, he's dying of cancer. So this isn't too much later, and I don't know medically when all this comes out, either for him or publicly. Well, they keep it privately for the general public, but the government ministers know that Chamberlain is dying of cancer. So Chamberlain isn't going to be the one leading Britain. And so they're changing out the prime minister, and it's going to be either Churchill or Halifax, basically, is going to be, Chamberlain is going to recommend to the king, and with the idea of making a war government, a unity government, in that there's even going to be some Labour, definitely some Liberals ministers in it. It's going to be in all parties government. And so the government isn't falling. Yeah, they're swapping out prime ministers, and they're going to do a reshuffle of the cabinet, obviously, and other things like that. But the British government is not collapsing in 1940. The French government collapses. The whole government structure. So basically, they turn it over to a dictatorship of Pétain. Well, Pétain, however you want to pronounce it, knows that France is militarily defeated. France can continue to fight, but they abandoned Paris because they knew that they weren't going to be able to hold Paris. They didn't want it destroyed. There's still lots of French divisions that are in, materially at least, meaning they have rifles, artillery, bullets, shells, whatever, able to fight, but there's not enough of them, and they're not in the right spot. Now, morale and or how they were able to, maneuver them into a coherent defensive line, he knows basically France is defeated. And this is sort of the elected politicians realizing and saying publicly, we failed. We fucked up, people. We're putting this guy in charge. If anybody can do anything, or the best deal we can get is going to be Pétain. And so, let's put the military in charge of the nation now that we're at war. And it's meant to be just, for the time of troubles. And so they start seeking a peace settlement. Well, this is sort of what, is, we see here, this map is what is proposed by the Germans. This bit of territory that was owned by Germany in 1914, beginning of World War I, goes back to Germany. We will occupy the rest, or this other parts of France, partially because we've occupied a lot of this. Partially, this part here we had yet to occupy. Germany was nowhere near this, but Germany wants to control the coast to keep the idea of a British counter invasion from sort of happening. So Germany's going to occupy this for basically, I think it's unspecified, but sort of understood until things are settled one way or another with Britain. And is definitely understood, whether that's what would have happened or not, that eventually, yes, the French government is going to get back full control of Paris. And maybe not, there still may be the idea of a, German occupation zone, sort of like the French occupation zone, the Ruhr, after World War I. There very well may be long-term, 10, 20, 30, 40 years of occupied, some of this area is heavily industrialized, occupied zones that, yes, still going to be French territory. Yes, Frenchmen are still going to live there, but it's going to be administered by Germany. Those are sort of my understanding of what is sort of understood. And as, was stated, it's going to take a lot of manpower for Germany to fully occupy it. And if Germany's still at war with France, well, France can fall back to, here, and they're going to have to be a lot of fighting, and they're going to take up a lot of troops, and yeah, we're just going to, do a negotiated settlement. So I don't blame Pétain for setting up the Vichy government. I said it's a bad idea. What, especially looking at it in the conditions under which they presumed it was going to be under. But of course, Britain fights on and other things. So, yeah, not so good. But we're going to... If this is sort of what's going to happen, if this is what's is going to happen, meaning Germany is able to defeat the landings and push them out, I think, yes, a version of the Vichy government would have fought on, would have been continued, because there was a version of the Vichy government even after full German occupation under Laval. Pétain is at best then later on a figurehead, if not actually removed at some point. So, and he is removed at some point from any effective functional, basically put under house arrest. Because if you can defeat the Americans' counter invasion, what's your choices? Continue to collaborate with the Germans and hope that whatever post-war situation will be, that you get back the bulk of your country. Option one. And this is presuming that, American and British invasions are defeated, and American and Britain are not going to be able to defeat Germany. So one, Germany is successful and you're just trying to get the best deal out from under a successful Germany. Or two, this is the victors, the Soviet Union. And if the Soviet Union is marching into Paris, that may be worse than the Germans to a lot of the French elites. I mean, of course, there's the leftist French elites that would cheer it. But a lot of the middle of the road and right-wing French, and not just right-wing, but middle of the road and right-wing French, will see a Soviet Union as worse than the Germans. Most Frenchmen despised the particularly the Frenchmen that went and fought for the SS. Most Frenchmen despised that. Not because they fought for the SS or no, let me restate that. Not that part. Not because they went and fought against the Soviet Union. No. What they despised them for was collaborating fully with their occupiers, the people that defeated them, the Germans. If you're a French policeman in Paris and you're collaborating, most of those people are, thought of as all right post the war, because mostly what they were doing was general law enforcement and mostly looking away from trying to hunt down any, saboteurs or British spies or whatever. Because I forget, there was one serial killer who was a doctor, a French guy, killing all kinds of people during it, and some horrific stuff going on that is eventually found out. And there's a lot of need for French law enforcement and other French people to occupy just to keep basic civil order going on. And so long as they're seen as not overly helping the Germans hunt down, people who blew up an arms factory or blew up a railway bridge, they're sort of like, yeah, they're sort of collaborating. Yeah, they're arresting Frenchmen. Yeah, it's not great, but we still sort of need them. So they're not out and out collaborators like the guys that went and fought for the Germans, mostly on the East Front. But if it hadn't been, particularly for German occupation, but even if they hadn't gone to war, had it been sort of like Sweden, I truly do believe this, many more Frenchmen would have volunteered purely for a crusade against Bolshevism. Okay, had it been the situation that let's change the start of the war. Whatever happened in Czechoslovakia happens, but the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact doesn't get signed. Hitler anyways goes to war with Poland, but France and Britain had not guaranteed Poland's independence, and a war breaks out just between Germany and the Soviet Union. So there's no war fought against the Frenchmen, but it's a crusade against Bolshevism. I think there would have been many Frenchmen volunteering to fight the Soviets. I'm not saying like half of French adults or anything like this, but a few divisions worth, which is still a very small fraction of the French male population. But I think there would have been a few divisions worth of volunteers if it was not seen as also collaborating against the enemies of France. Just because the Soviets are enemy, a lot of these people saw them as the Soviets as enemies of France, doesn't mean that you want to help the other enemies of France. The enemy of your enemy isn't necessarily your friend, kind of thing. And what is Rex saying? Maybe try to switch to infantry law tech. I mean, you can reduce the amount of people in infantry. Yes, I know you can. I'm going to avoid doing that, but yeah, just because of the needs of the manpower, I don't want to do that, but it may not be a bad idea. In my opinion, and I'm not going to say I fully know all the details of everything, in my opinion, it is really only useful to do that if you don't have enough division to spread along your front line. But right now, we have enough divisions. It's just we don't have enough manpower. So we could disband some of our divisions and still have plenty of divisions. So you really only, in my opinion, only really want to do that is if you look around and go, I need more divisions somewhere. Now I've got plenty of divisions. I need more supplies, more manpower for those divisions. Or I should just remove some divisions. So that's really more. Well, okay. Well, the Allies failed when they decided to do a phony. Absolutely, there's the whole phony war stuff. That's very true. That's a whole. There's a lot of topics on that idea, but Brits are the worst case. They didn't do anything until Norway. Well, Marcel kept the body. Oh, that's right. Okay, I forget his name. Yeah, kept the bodies in his Paris basement. Yes, and well, also I think disposed of some, and a lot of people were supposedly, he claimed that he was helping smuggle them out, which is why they disappeared or something. Yes, some weird stuff. Going on. France collapsed in 39. Short story of betrayal of England and France colonial policy towards Eastern. I don't know. I'm more 40, but yeah. The enemy of my enemy is my second enemy degree. Yes, Niagara. Yes, that kind of thing. The Soviets are not your friends. Even though you may want to supply them with weapons to help defeat, now the whole idea from Britain and America's perspective is they wanted to charge into Berlin, but they didn't want the Soviets to collapse either. Now, obviously, Germany or the Soviets get to Berlin before the Western Allies do. Stupid Germans. They keep fighting in the West, but when they should have just allowed that front to collapse. And by the time not so much D-Day, which is 1944, but by the time the Battle of the Bulge ends, the Ardennes offensive is over, the German various levels of command, divisional commanders, corps commanders, army commanders in the West should just be like, yeah, throw in the towel, let the Allies plunge through Western Germany and try to meet up with the Soviets somewhere here or something. They should have been looking at that instead of fighting in. But most industries were in the West. Yes, but just let it collapse, and just let the Americans and the British just occupy everything. And see, that's basically because the Elbe River is where they meet up. But you can look at drawing of the borders, is a lot of it has to do with where the Soviets occupied. So they used Poland as a shield, and they 1 more year to prepare for war. The enemy, my enemy, dies second. Yeah, so it's that type of thing. Okay, we lost Panzer Ableting. Okay, good. What unit did we just lose? Okay. Martinik's division, the last time they died was in counterattacking there. We'll send you up to here because we got swamps maybe to fight in. We'll refind a new. Need to go east to command your corps. Name you. This thing that was up in Finland. Well, you can head up to Saturn. Okay, well, this attack does not seem to be doing overly well. I think we're going to stop it. So we've lost. We're just going to hold out here. Mostly holding out here to keep them from pushing too far over to here. Round. We're holding here. Okay-ish. They'll be back with some more reinforcements. So you're not attached to anybody? Well, let's attach you. I think your HQ got killed. And I think your HQ got killed. Yep, Finland ain't doing well. We just aren't doing well. Yes, okay. Yes, we won. They tried to counterattack, thinking that maybe I stopped attacking because I was in too bad of a shape. I stopped attacking, not to be... Okay. We've won that battle. Now kill them. Yep, they get to kill those military police guys. Oh, so they're now ashore here. They've been fighting ashore for some time. Okay, so they've gotten ashore. They have... Okay, some decent divisions that were put offshore. I really like what they've done. This is so much better than before. It used to be with some of these invasions, it was coded so that they would stop, or they would switch the territorial control from Germany to America, or whatever, I'm thinking some, up here, but from whatever nation to like America, and place the units on top. So okay, everybody, here's a major pronouncement. This is great, and this is why I played this long series. Obviously, I could have just played it on my own, but partially I wanted to fill the time here, making episodes for you. I wanted to see how their new scripted invasions worked. It used to be counterproductive to build fortifications along the coast, because what would happen is they would script an invasion, and that invasion would change ownership of the province from whatever current to, like, say, the Americans, and place American units there. So there would be German units defending here. This is for the D-Day invasion, obviously. There would be German units here that theoretically should be invading, but they were actually, the German units are now attacking because the American forces are here, and it's American-controlled territory, and any fortification would help the defenders, and the defenders are now Americans. So if you built the Atlantic Wall, you're actively building it against yourself. That's what it was. Now, if you just built coastal defense, well, that doesn't help against the land attack. But that is, neither here nor there, because you're defending. Now, and I presume the others are going to work this way, is because what we watched here was they placed these units here, and we just saw the top, the HQ. They placed the HQ here, along with these two other divisions. Here, the 1st Armored Division and Z Force. They placed them here. They placed them out here, and with some sort of instructions, and I'd have to go in and look at the code, and I did not go and look at the code. Tinky, they used to work against you. So now they place the units at sea with the coding that they're actively attacking. This, and then so here I think they immediately popped in because they did give they made this least national territory, but I don't think there were any Vichy forces here. And over here you saw them here and here. I don't think there were any Vichy forces here. This does become national territory still, but I don't know whether this national territory was actually a change of control, because you can change national territory and you can change control, because this is currently U.S. national territory with provincial claims, or with claims by France and Vichy France, and under the control of Vichy France, but it's still considered American national territory right now, is the definition of this province here. This is a Vichy French province that's currently under U.S. control, where this is, again, a U.S. province under Vichy control. So now, and I'm presuming it's working, and I don't see why they wouldn't have made the other invasions work like this. Now, if you were to build the Atlantic Wall, it's now an actual useful defensive. So, and so I stopped building Atlantic walls, or just building minimal Atlantic wall, because they would still work against the idea of an AI invasion. But I did not want heavy ones that made me fight back in. So, but now it is useful to build this. So this is a great improvement to scripted invasions. I like scripted invasions, partially because we talked earlier about how the AI was taught with their Finest Hour DLC to only invade unless it was somehow it thought it was overwhelmingly done. To go back to that subject, they used to do a lot of suicide invasions, so you could just leave a port. If the AI detected a port that was empty, it would invade. Even if it saw a bunch of panzer divisions around it, here you could just invade, destroy the forces, rinse and repeat, and bleed whatever nation that was doing it dry. Now that would actually be a good thing, or all these suicide invasions, if they'd just done one little thing, one simple little thing in their code. And again, we don't have we have access to some of the AI, and which I forget why. Which I'm going into doing the production AI, and I'm changing some of that, and they've helped me out with giving me coding examples, and so I can, if you give me examples of things and that I can copy and paste and then change a little bit, I can work with. So we have like production AI, we modders can get in and do it, but the combat AI, we don't have access to it. We can't modify it. We can't look at it. But if they just done one little thing about, and they can also code these invasions nation by nation, not just, they can do it generically or they can code it nation by nation. But for like British invasions, if they kept the old For the Motherland code and just changed one little parameter, and that would have been, is Germany at war with Soviet Union? That's all they had to have, was a check for that. Because then, if you dump in a huge number of, you dump in 5 divisions or something here, because you see nothing defending it, Germany is not going to have 15 divisions or whatever it would need just to crush them, because it needs to have those divisions on the Eastern Front. Or, well then, hey, it's 15 and it can't, and it takes a while for them to be, so it can't be 15 divisions spread all out along here, because 5 divisions would crash into, I'm talking good divisions, not just weak garrison forces, but you'd have to have good divisions spread out all along here, and if they were able to crash in, it's going to take them a while. Maybe I could deactivate it, we may be defeating it eventually, but it's going to take a huge amount of units away from possible use on the Eastern Front. So whether the invasion is successful or not, you could, and the old, and this gave me the habit of sticking one unit in every single port, because if you did that, they would try to invade the port. Normally it would, be enough of a defense, even a minimal unit like this from 2 or 3 divisions, and it would just go home, and then it would try again, and it would go home. So I could have weak defenses guarding the ports, keeping the AI from doing anything too serious. Okay. Well, that would be fine, but if they got it sort of serious and then pushed in, hey, that's just taking it off from the east, and so it messes with it. So it would be doing a 2-front war, even if the invasion wasn't so perfect, So, but we don't have access to that. And what is right? I always wanted to recreate a scenario of World War I with Russia as an Eastern Front Poland. Yes, Poland should join the Axis. Neutrality is out of the question, and 44 switch sides. Germany, okay. Now France is the biggest collaborator from all the Western countries. Is big resistance, yes. The idea that there are no countries between East and West makes me laugh. I'm not sure about how you're looking at that, but okay. Paradox and AI isn't on the best of terms. Yes. Like enemies. Yeah. Well, the AI or Paradox seems to be able to do big doomstack ideas. If you look at, and I haven't played the more recent EUs, but a little bit, but if you create big doomstacks, they're able to move those around and have battles and work that relatively effectively. But they're not able to do this kind of stuff well. not well. So, yeah. So, but this is really good news. The Black Ice people have done a really good job here. Okay, we've crushed that. And what division just got shattered? Oh, up in Finland, one of our forces up. Well, was it up here? Yeah, no, I think it just headquartered out of there. I think, I don't know. Okay, well, move it to set and we'll send it back up. Maybe we'll keep them alive. We should be having these guys coming around here, back here. They had delivered some reinforcements just to hold up here, keep the Soviets something of an occupied on that front instead of letting them concentrate everything against me. Good. Speed has them. These motor torpedo boats are doing all right. Well, they haven't. Those guys are really slow. So let's move these guys back here so maybe we can hold this port, which is sort of important. Anything? No, just an HQ. Okay. There's just an HQ. They can go back to there because they're not a decent fighting unit. Let's put those guys up here. And we can hold Mariupol. 6-0. That one of these guys just crashed out. Okay. Well, and we can see this here. Let's. They're currently reinforcing. Yeah, we're not gonna win this. They've got too much here. Okay, I just wondered how well. Okay, and naval forces nowhere. They go back to there. Okay, well, that potential naval invasion is not looking good. The story is you never trust an Anglo as he cares only about himself. I would disagree with that, but okay, how do I put this? Britain is incapable of defending Poland. We're talking World War II, with Germany sitting in there. So no matter what Britain says it wants to do, it knows it's incapable of doing it. France, on the other hand, well, it's also incapable of defending Poland. But France is at least capable of launching a serious offensive against Germany. Okay? France is unwilling to go on the offensive against Germany. Yeah, I know about the Saarland offensive that sort of scared the French and they went home after they attacked and the Germans retreated. Oh shit, something must be wrong. They retreated. We got to go home. It's really the French, because the British could help the French attack Germany, but the British can't attack Germany because there's nowhere for them to attack Germany. Okay, what are they going to invade up here? No, they can't. They cannot effectively attack Germany. Okay, and if you go, well, they should attack through France. France wouldn't let them. France panics and says, what the hell, Britain? When they find out that Britain dropped some bombs on Germany early in the war. And I think they were mostly just bombing like the some of the forests, some of the, the forests and around this area, and some of the other stuff. They're going, no, don't bomb. You're going to get those Germans mad. Don't do that. No. Propaganda leaflets, yes. Dropping bombs, no. They were, this is even under, Chamberlain before the Battle of France. France was really upset that that Britain attacked Germany with bombs because they're afraid of retaliation. If Britain wanted to attack, along the Maginot Line, but attacking into there, France would have stopped them. Before the the big invasion, France would have stopped them. France was, you want to help? You want you and us go in and help defend Belgium once Germany attacks? Sure, great, no problem. Once Germany attacks Belgium, we're going to go defend Belgium. Notice the key word: go defend Belgium, not attack Germany. France does not want to attack Germany. So I put the blame entirely in France's court, not in Britain's court. So you can have your opinions, but I'm just disagreeing with that. In Hoitou, you had militia with artillery on all the beaches as Italy and Spain. Garrisons got killed, then pushed. Right. It was enough to react to the landings, and it didn't need much manpower. Absolutely. And you could use militia-type forces. I just sort of use garrisons with rocket artillery, are fairly cheap. AA gives some hard attack and some penetration, and as well as anti-aircraft. So it's just sort of a cheap way of doing something, and meant to be delayed enough. The whole idea is to delay it enough, and I've sent my I had 6 panzer divisions. We can see 3 of them here, and no, there's the other. Where's the other one? And the other one's here. Where? Okay, no orders. Where? Oh, you're here. Okay, here. This is the other one. I had 6 panzer divisions throughout the whole time sitting here that are the forces made up of former French units, plus a few other stuff. As a 6 divisions mobile reaction force, which I had moved down here to deal with this. So that should be enough to deal with most invasions. It was just I moved it out to deal with down here. Britain sends the fleet into the Baltic Sea and makes landfall in Denmark. Yeah. Yeah, and see, that's especially in the age of air power, that is not going to happen. Battle of Mariupol. Let's see, can we win any of this stuff? Maybe. In the 19th century, that might actually work. Sending the British fleet and successfully landing troops and helping something like Poland, but not in the middle of the 20th century with air power. Britain just can't do that. Even if you have, aircraft carriers and whatnot, it's just not going to happen. But look, I'm guessing maybe Nazca is Polish, but don't know for sure. Poland is doomed if it has powerful neighbors that want it. Okay. I don't know if they could ever build up and become an industrial giant. That would be great and fine, and I would love it if they did. But because we can look back to the partitioning of Poland between Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Yeah, they'll just slice it up if it's big neighbors. If there's big neighbors, because obviously you could break up Russia. You could have Ukraine. You could have, actually have a different country, a Belarus, and have the Baltic states, and have, Hungary, and you have medium-sized countries around it. And if they don't all together agree and want to destroy Poland, Poland could defend itself. But if it's looking at there's a German Empire or a Prussian Empire and a Russian Empire and a Austrian Empire, Poland's just doomed. It just doesn't have the defensive geography. The story. In fact, Polish throughout that they can defend itself and no one can take on Russia just because great works of disinformation. Yeah. The only one that could save Poland from the Soviets is Germany and vice versa. Sadly, the split it, and that's, yes. Well, Hitler wants to erase Poland. And the Soviet Union, short-sightedly, in my opinion, wants to grab Poland, or as much of Poland as it can, or had it sort of like, yeah, they're anti-Bolsheviks, anti-communists, and we fought them in 1920, but they're a good buffer state. Had they just thought in those terms, they would have done a lot better. Never as weak as you think they are, and never as strong as you think they are. Sun Tzu. Yes, Rack, you're right about Sun Tzu. The RN has done the Copenhagen move too many times. People expect it these days. Yes, but it worked under Nelson because, again, it was sea power, and land power could only be projected as far as a cannon shot, and then half of that cannon shot distance, it becomes basically ineffective anyways against a big fleet. Fortification shooting off a few shells as some ships sail past, way out there. That's nothing. It's only they got to get in close before they really be effective. There are many studies by historians who refuted the myth of the powerlessness of the Allies in the Second World War. Okay, I don't know exactly what you're referring to there, Sebastian, and both studies and powerlessness refute it. But you have to remember, warfare is a political act. Warfare is political. Okay, at its core, warfare is political. I mentioned before, just a moment ago, that France was worried about being bombed because Britain was bombing some German targets, not just dropping leaflets like they had been before, but actively doing some early strategic bombing against some targets in the Ruhr. I think forests were on some of it because they were trying to minimize civilian casualties, but they were starting to do some bombing. Now, why were the French so worried about this? Well, the French were worried about the overwhelming power of the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe was so huge, so powerful, and I don't mean powerful as in that they had better fighters or better bombers, just it was so big. They were worried about this overwhelming power of the Luftwaffe and the number of aircraft. You see, the French didn't know that their Air Force was about equal in size and probably about as modern as the Luftwaffe. Maybe the Luftwaffe is a little more modern. But France alone was equal to or slightly bigger, France's Air Force, than the Luftwaffe. That doesn't count the RAF or doesn't count the Belgian Air Force or what this was after the fall of Poland. But the Luftwaffe is actually, in a material strength, weaker than the French. But perception, and politics is perception, okay? You perceive what your perception, it's not the reality, it's the perception. Politics is perception. It was earlier mentioned, you pass laws that the government either will not or cannot enforce is not, they're not effective. Well, they're actually counter-effective because if you pass a law and it either will not or cannot enforce, it creates the perception of governments being ineffective, being bad, and that's actually counterproductive. In governments, you don't do that. So perception. You don't outlaw something like alcohol and then show that you can't control it, and so that there's more people drinking alcohol after you outlaw it than there are, and there's more alcohol being drunk after you've outlawed it than it was before, and then that's why you get rid of prohibition, right? Okay, so perception was that the Luftwaffe was bigger, and this is at the high private levels in French's military and political thinking, not maybe what was thought on the public streets. But France's Air Force was equally as big, if not bigger, than the Luftwaffe. Now, which is more powerful? Well, the Luftwaffe, although smaller, was more powerful because it had the command and control loops, forward observers, rapid reaction to enemy invasion, sort of like the RAF, at least over Britain, not over everywhere in the world, but over Britain was more powerful than the attacking Luftwaffe, even when the Luftwaffe had more fighters and bombers, because use of radar, they were able to bring all of their fighters in against an incoming enemy, where the Germany thought, well, it's just the fighters in this area were scrambling and come. No, it's all the fighters. So wherever they went, Britain was able to get basically all of the available fighters in on that battle and vector it in. So even though the Luftwaffe was even in the operation zones, and we're not talking about North Africa at the time or later on once the Soviet Union's going, we're talking about just a Luftwaffe in this area at the time, had more aircraft, had more bombers, had more fighters than the RAF, at least at points during the time, even more ready to operate. But in this theater of operation, Britain was more powerful because it was able to use its resources more effectively. So yes, the Luftwaffe was more powerful than the French Air Force because it was better able to use the power that it had, but pure industrial capability, pure military capability in the sense of how many fighters they had and how many machine gun bullets they had and all that stuff, France was more powerful than the Luftwaffe alone, but it had other allies. But so whatever you want to say about studies and the powerfulness or lessness or whatever of the Western allies prior to the Americans entering the war, a lot of it comes down to perception, because it's political. It's a political act. And this, so anybody who's looking, and it's fine for people to do studies about, production levels and how many bullets a division had and how much stores of gasoline, how much stores of aviation gasoline, to how much you can operate, how much could the Italian Navy operate for its stores of oil, because you burn oil for the big ships, not gasoline, its operational level. But in my opinion, the real problem with the Italian Navy wasn't that it didn't have enough fuel. It was a political decision that it doesn't want the fleet sunk. So only engage the British Navy when you are sure that you are in overwhelming superiority. So if you can put 3 battleships to their 1 battleship and sink their 1 battleship, go. But if it looks like, oops, there could be even numbers, no, stay in port. No, don't go out. Don't risk it. Fly a few aircraft, see if you can sink a few of them. Then we'll go out if you sink a few battleships. But otherwise, no. So, yes, part of, Italy's problem with warfare in the Mediterranean is they did less patrolling even of the, destroyers and whatnot, because they were worried about using up their limited oil resources. So, yes, material resources do come into Italians' military thinking in a practical sense, but much more is it's that political sense of not willing to risk a bad outcome of a battle, because whether it's political or popular perception, the Italian fleet just got sunk, gets headlines over Italy. What are the Italian people going to do? 2, well, if that's sunk, well, then we're vulnerable to invasion, and it's all of those kind of things come into it. And you have to take that into understanding of the people's viewpoint of the time. So it doesn't matter what if there's the wrong thinking going on. Sorry, chat's going a little fast. Let's see. Strong long-term war. World War II was a war of systems. A war of systems were far better, the Germans in long-term war, but against Poland. Well, okay. January, have you seen episode about food shortages in the Third Reich? Yes, I have seen some of them. I disagree with some of his conclusions. Maybe we'll get to that in a moment. I just want to quickly get through this chat here. They're also shocked by armored blitzkrieg. Yes. They did not think they would bleed out in Poland, but they did not think about the Ruthians. Just don't look into Germany's back line. It's donkeys and horse carts, right, for supply. The French kept most of their modern fighters in hangars while the Luftwaffe had theirs in the air. And the French were slow to supply squadrons with the fighters in storage. Yes, there is, whether they were literally in storage or simply at the hangars waiting for the word to scramble, to get up and going, meaning a fully equipped fighter squadron. The French, and it's both things I believe are true, Beam Slam, because they were receiving some more modern fighters. The Vichy France had a bunch of modern fighters in storage that they'd gotten from America at the time of surrender that they hadn't even assembled yet. And that they did assemble, and they used some of them, and some of the bombers they got to bomb Gibraltar. The French bombed Gibraltar after the British sunk the French fleet. So the French bombed the British eventually in Gibraltar. They had more of that. So it's partially logistic, but it's also partially command and control. Now, I divide warfare into two types, of getting back, I think, to Rack's, one of the long-term war versus short-term war. I believe warfare can be generally put into two basic categories: a war of attrition and war of maneuver and decision. Okay, those are the two categories: attrition and maneuver and decision. Look at the American Civil War. If it's a war of attrition, and yes, politics and all that come into play, but if it's a war of attrition, the North always will win against the Confederacy. They have more manpower, they have more industry, they have more food production, all kinds of stuff. The South has enough food production, sort of. A lot of their agriculture is designed for commerce production, to cotton and tobacco to make money that bought food from the North to feed itself. They can switch over to it, but they're not set up for it. But if it's a war of maneuver and decision, like whether you want to call it the First Bull Run or Battle of Manassas, same battle, two different names, the Union Army was beat. Had the Confederates, and there were units that they could have, because I've war gamed that battle out a few times. There were some units that were in good enough shape to push towards Washington, D.C., but they thought there was going to be some resistance, so they didn't, because there wasn't enough of the units ready enough to march on Washington, D.C., because the Confederate Army, although won, and for a while it was looking like they were going to lose that battle. This is the first real big maneuver battle of the Civil War. That happens sort of outside of Washington, D.C., basically. Had they just been able to push just a few battalions into Washington, D.C., I think D.C. would have surrendered. I think the much of the political establishment would have fled the city and would have run away. Well, if the South then could, a few days later, once they got their army reorganized from that battle, with the following, be able to push up into Maryland and threaten northern states, I think you might have had a Confederate victory. And there are a few other points that can be debated that could have gone different ways, including the Gettysburg Campaign and a few others. Had you kept that a war of maneuver and decision, the Confederacy has a chance. I'm not saying it's going to win, but it has a chance. So if you're going to fight a war of attrition between Britain and France and Germany, Britain and France versus Germany, Britain and France is probably going to win a war of attrition. But the Germans were able to achieve it, turn it into a war of maneuver and decision. On the Eastern Front, Germany tries for a war of maneuver and decision. Unfortunately, because of the scale of the battlefield, Germany just exhausts itself in that the trucks that are leaving from East Prussia, by the time they're out here somewhere, they're breaking down. The tanks are breaking down. They need maintenance. They need, even without, we're not even talking combat. We're they're just literally breaking down from driving too far over rough terrain. The soldiers are exhausted. The ammunition is exhausted. The supply lines, we know, can't keep even the amount of ammunition that they are making going. So they exhaust themselves. And because the scale of Russia is so big, the maneuver and decision element is too small. It can't do it in one campaign. And because of Hitler, and he has reasons, good reasons, not necessarily good enough reasons, but good reasons, that he wants to hold as much territory as he conquers, so he turns it into a war of attrition, where some of the generals wanted to keep it a war of maneuver, go, okay, yeah, we've lost, well, let's retreat back here, let them fill back in, and then we'll do big super pockets. So we'll keep destroying their, we'll destroy 5 of their tanks for every one of ours, but we'll also destroy those units by doing pockets and getting large groups of men and not letting them just battle them on the front, but destroy their functional ability to fight these units and keep it a war of maneuver and decision that's still somewhat attritional in that it's not just in one campaign. But Hitler refuses the idea for various reasons, because again, warfare is political. He doesn't want to be seen to be, oh, well, we've been here in Rostov-on-the-Don. Okay, now what? We're going back to the, maybe not exactly the Romanian border, but we're going all the way back here voluntarily. Oh, no, that's a defeat. That's politically, that's too difficult to do. So it's partially political. It's also Hitler is worried about resources that he didn't have, Germany didn't have access to, that they captured, and he doesn't want to give them up. Again, there are good reasons for what Hitler wants to do, but they're not necessarily good enough reasons. Meaning it isn't, what he wasn't deciding to do is entirely stupid. It just isn't, in my opinion, the best idea of what was available, of ideas presented at the time. Where I'm not just like me looking back at it saying, well, this is what they should have done. No, we should have just listened to these other generals at the time that were saying that this should have been done. And that might have been a loss too. I don't know. But it would have kept that idea of Germany able to concentrate its divisions, use its command and control links to fight a war in such a way that the enemies, that really Britain gets good enough to match Germany, and America gets good enough to actually overwhelm Germany in its flexibility of fighting, and its command and control, and its ability to bring air power, ground power, artillery, all of that on the enemy. It outdoes Germany, but that takes time. But even though it outdoes Germany, if Germany isn't bogged down in the east, I don't know that America can win. Let's see what everybody's saying here. I know I've been on a roll. French kept most of their, why is it so disturbing to me that there are no friends between the West that treat Poland and other Central European countries as natives and Russia's as rebel provinces? Okay, well, you're starting to get into legacies of the Cold War, of lack of knowledge, a lot of stuff. There's I've learned, I thought Romania was an Eastern European country. And in ways it is. I'm not going to say, and obviously it's been under the Iron Curtain, but in ways it's a Western European country because they speak Latin. Now their Latin is super screwy. It's called Romanian, and they don't know freaking how to spell Latin. And Latin is also spoken in Italy and France and Spain. Meaning I'm not talking classical Latin. I'm talking a truly Latin-based language. English has lots of Latin elements in it, but it isn't a true Romantic language. It's a heavily Romantic influence language. And so Romania's culture is sort of that. It isn't, Ukrainian. It isn't Magyar. It isn't, Bulgar or whatever. It's sort of weird Eastern Roman Empire that now it's been shaped and whatnot by a lot of Eastern influences. But so if you sort of try to read Romanian as if it were Latin and just with funky spellings, you sort of make sense. So yeah, it's a lot of things, and it's a language getting to Cyrillic in some cases. It's religious in that, yes, I know Poland is Catholic, but, it's Eastern Europe if you're talking, because you have, various Eastern Orthodoxy type Orthodox religions. And, there's a lot of stuff out there that really people aren't, and you're typing faster than I can read all these things. Sorry, I'll get to some of them. And then, of course, you had, approximately 50 years of Cold War. And I grew up in the latter part of the Cold War being old enough to be aware in the 70s, born in the 60s. Some people will say 1860s or 1760s or something, but really just the 1960s. And so growing up with all of the, Eastern Bloc Cold War, we were cut off from information on all of that. We just don't have... information on that. Romanian Orthodoxy. Yeah, I know. And it's, there's all kinds of various things. So the Cold War really sort of does, we just don't have information on Poland because Germany was trying to erase Poland, and once the Soviets took it over, they're trying to control it in Soviet propaganda. So if you look at stuff in Third Reich events, I cover some of Germany's confiscations of books, destructions of various cult in the East and the West, not, Germany's doing this stuff. And, they're just really... what was happening in Poland, we just don't know. We in the West just don't know. Not that the information isn't out there, but we just didn't have access to it because it was behind the Iron Curtain, and the Soviets weren't letting people in because they may be, CIA spies. So, there were a few people getting in, but not many. And if you went to the Eastern Europe, you weren't going to work for the U.S. government in a sensitive place because maybe you're a Soviet spy. So yeah, there was a lot of that stuff, and that is still coloring our ideas. Hello, Lawless. How you doing? Let's see. I want to save this one more time here just in case. Let's see what some of the earlier things. Got to scroll up here. In case of the American Civil War, there's any case of missed opportunities. Yes, CSA never went on a proper offensive until Gettysburg. Yeah, there's various things with and I'm not going to get into the details because this isn't today's topic, but yeah, but it's just the idea that if it's attritional, the North is always going to win. The South is a great fighting nation, set up, organized. Lee sets up their military, and then it has great commanders, so it's able to make the Union pay a lot to conquer it, but it's always going to lose if it's attritional. But if it's maneuver and decision, the South has a chance, and there's a few opportunities, if you will, that could have made it so. Agree. The main reason why I don't believe about the nice story that Hitler possessed innocent Germans, they want to sell it now. Germany works since about concepts of, well, Germany post-World War I is a messed up place for various reasons. Can't fight a war without fuel and resources against an opponent. It's more mobile than you. Yeah, but for a while, Germany had enough oil. For a while. Lots of Russians were more motorized than the Germans, and they kept... Yeah, Germans didn't have as much motorization as we think. But the idea is that they had the flexibility for their motorized forces if they were to use it, but they end up in this second half or so just using their motorized forces as fire brigades to stop Soviet penetrations, as opposed to especially post Stalingrad, as being able to go on good offensives. And that's not saying they should have been able to, but they weren't willing to come back. Romanians themselves are Rome's last state. They even have their own Orthodox Church, but Romania and Eastern Europe, yeah. Call themselves Balkans. Okay, I'm just trying to catch up with the chat. True, I went to Romania when I was 10 years old. The family in Transylvania, German, and I remember the dogs and controls. It was a lot of security. thank goodness the Cold War ended somewhat. Yes, it has ended somewhat. In many cases. It's okay, gamer. We know that technically World War II started in 1941, all things considered. It became a proper World War after that infamous day. I mean, the USA. Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, that's when it truly becomes a world war. Is bringing America and Japan into a unified war. Because the Japanese war prior to 41, yeah, they had occupied basically peacefully French Indochina, but that was really just a Sino-Japanese war, or Chinese-Japanese war. Basically separate from anything else going on. Basically, and obviously it starts earlier, whether you want to start it with the invasion of Manchukuo or the later Marco Polo Bridge incident, where you want to define that starting out, and you can define it in multiple ways, but definitely going full on by the Marco Polo Bridge incident. That's an ongoing war that is separate from the European war until Japan declares war, not only on America, but on America and on Britain and, the Netherlands, Australia, and other places functionally. That is when it turns into a world war. Prior to that, it's a Europe war, a sort of two wars before that. You have the Allies versus Germany, and then Germany versus the Soviet Union. Yeah, I know about Lend-Lease and some stupidly limited operations. But there was, I believe, a proposal. I don't know if you quite want to go to a plan, but a proposal to bring in some RAF elements into the Balkans, or not the Balkans, the Caucasus down here. And Stalin says no. This was either before America was in the war or after America was in the war, but before America was active, really able to engage in the war. But he doesn't want the British. He doesn't even want the British influence in down here. So they're really Hearts of Iron 3 and 4 really sort of gets it right, and especially 3 does, in which it's a three-sided war. You could almost go to 4 with Japan, but it's really the Western Allies, Germany, and factions. Western Allies factions, Germany, or the Axis faction, and the Soviets. And yes, the Allies and the Soviets often cooperate, do Lend-Lease, do all that, blah, 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 but they're different factions that have a common enemy, but are not really friends. Or is it? Okay. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, well, I think we're going to end the episode here. I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Really do appreciate all of that. So we're going to continue this. We have done fairly well down here. We're going to fight this down. Still being pushed back here more and more and more. But we'll see how that goes. Stay tuned for next time. See ya, everyone.